Start? Yep. Do I need to check myself in at all?
You're already in.
Okay. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. We just have a few housekeeping items first. First of all, I've been asked to confirm that the meeting is being recorded and also broadcast. Nobody has any option about that, but it's just fair, I think, to warn people. The first item on the agenda is apologies, and I'm going to go over to Kieran Elliott, who's on my left, who is our committee clerk or Democratic Services Officer. Do we have any apologies, Kieran?
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Edward Kirk.
Are there any replacements?
Not that I've been informed, Chair.
Okay, so we're down to 10 members today. Minutes of the previous meeting are on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda report. Does anyone have any corrections or additions or anything to raise on those minutes? If not, then I will move. Councillor Clark. Okay, I thought for a moment you had some correction. Okay, I will move and you will second that we approve them. All in favour, please indicate. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, those are approved. The declarations of interest, this is only for members of Wiltshire Council. Nobody else needs to declare any interests in anything. Only Wiltshire councillors, whether on the committee or off. Does anyone have any declarations of interest in anything on today's agenda? I'm looking all around the room and not seeing any hands. Chairman's announcements, just the usual ones. First of all, could I ask everyone, please, to put their smartphones, devices, iPads, anything else to silent. We don't mind them being on, but so long as they don't interrupt someone who is speaking. Don't know of any planned fire drills, so if you hear what's obviously a fire bell going off, I will just hand over immediately to Kieran, who will tell us all the quick and easy and safe way to get out of the building. Item 5, public participation. This is for two things. It's for any questions that have been sent in within a certain deadline to be answered, and it's for any members of the public who would like to speak, who have signed in to speak, but would rather do it straight away rather than waiting for their particular item to come up. Kieran, I don't think we have any notice of questions, do we?
We do not, Chair.
No. So does anyone, this is only for people who've signed in to speak. Would anybody like to go straight away because you need to be somewhere else? I'm looking around the room and not seeing any hands. I will just talk you through the procedure that a number of you will have never been to a meeting like this before, so it might be helpful if we just talk you through the way we do things. First of all, an officer, and in this case, we only have one item on the agenda, so it's the officer, David Cox, who's sitting on my right, will present his report on his planning application, or in fact, we also have a planning appeals update, which is going to be dealt with by Kenny Green. Let me take a little step back. This is the first time we have ever had a hybrid meeting, and we have with us our senior planning officer, Kenny Green, who is at some remote distance. He seems to be in a very swish sort of villa on the south of France or something, and he's able to join us remotely. And I'll just ask you to wave a hat in Kenny so that everybody knows that you are also one of the officers supporting this committee, but you just don't happen to be physically present in the room, but that is absolutely fine, and we will bring you in due course when the moment comes. I was just saying that we have a report from an officer. Members can then ask questions. Members of the committee, and indeed any member of the council, I'm happy to bring in who wants to ask a question to the officer. We then have speakers in the open forum who may be for or against, and we take the objectors first, and then we take the supporters, and then we take any statutory consultees like parish councils or AONBs. Then we bring in the local member if he or she is not on the committee, but today we only have one local member, and that's Councillor Carvin, and he is on the committee, so he will get to speak first when we come to the debate. I hope that explains the batting order. And then for those of you who've signed in to speak, we are supposed to be reasonably strict about the limit of 3 minutes each, or in fact 4 minutes if someone is representing a parish council. We're supposed to be reasonably strict about that simply for the sake of fairness. If we allowed people to go on for 4 or 5 minutes and one side stuck to 3 minutes and the other side didn't, it would sort of be not very fair, and we are encouraged to try to keep you all as much as possible to the time limit. If somebody does go over, I will offer a little extra time to someone from the other side if possible. So the first item on our agenda, the first main item on our agenda, is item 6, planning, appeals and updates. And we're going to go over to Kenny Green, who is just going to briefly tell us about the report on the planning appeal outcomes that we've had since the last meeting. Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I'm not there in person today, but personal circumstances have resulted in me being without a car today. So I'm from home. The background is a false one. I don't live in a villa. So the appeals update is fairly short today. We only have had one decided appeal, and again, it's a good outcome in that the planning inspector agreed with our decision to refuse a 2-bedroom dwelling house in the rear garden of a property at Orchard Road in Trowbridge. So again, it demonstrates that we as a council rely upon our adopted plan, even when we've got a housing deficit. If we can identify substantial harm that outweigh the benefit of an additional house to the supply, we rely upon our policies rigorously, and the inspector accepted the points that we're making in terms of that particular scheme not being necessarily acceptable, not being sustainable. And it just goes to prove again that the primacy of the local plan stands up to scrutiny, and I'm glad to say the inspector agreed with our position, Chair.
Any questions to Kenny Green about the appeals update? I'm looking around the room. I'm not seeing anyone indicating. So in that case, all we have to do is to note the report. I'll move that we note the report. Anyone to second? Thank you, Councillor Clark. All in favour of noting it. This is just a formality that we do. Any against? Okay, so that is noted. That then takes us on to the main business of today, which is, it says planning applications in the plural, but we've only got one, and it is this application at the Old Vicarage and Staverton House, New Terrace, Staverton. The case officer is David Cox, and I'm going to ask him to take us through his report and presentation on this application.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few updates. We still haven't actually had any correspondence from Natural England yet. The appropriate assessment our ecology officer concluded favourably. So as per the recommendation, we're still waiting for Natural England to confirm, or for failing that, giving them a final update to say for our ecology officer to conclude that Natural England have had, I think they're until the 10th of December to come back with their, that was the deadline of their 3-week consultation period, to then conclude, well, we had to assume that they have then known no comment and that the appropriate assessment has therefore passed. Also, we've had, in arranging the site visits to the neighbours today, technically we've had 3 further representations with the email correspondence with those neighbours who wish to also then reiterate their objections to the scheme to me, which is very understandable. There's nothing new other than to reiterate their objections. So there's no, just to update, there has been 3 more objections, but with no new elements to them. Just turning to the report itself, I apologise, but in the table we've put Hilperton instead of Staverton. So that's a mistake. Also on page 14, I've put case home and not care home. That's a typo. And also on page 16, I've put existing site plan on one of the snip images. That's not, that was actually a superseded site plan when the flat roof section actually had a pitched roof over it. So that's a slight error on that, which I wish to apologise for. So as we saw from the site visit, the application is to demolish the old vicarage, the two-story element, which is the front of the site, and then its recent single-story extension on the back. Probably just at this point, good point to point out that as we saw inside, the old vicarage is not really fit for purpose for a modern-day care home, especially one with dementia care needs. There was no lift, there was no reasonable prospect of adding one, and we saw that modern beds need space, hoisting size, they need space either side of the rooms, and to be able to get the beds in and out into corridors. And there needs to be a functionality within that of a modern care home, to which, unfortunately, the old vicarage just doesn't be able to provide. There's also one other thing just to bear in mind, really, with probably a nationwide recruitment process at the moment. The competition for care home staff is probably I understand, to be quite fierce. So within maximising the care provision within the site itself, there's also built within that is a staff retention, staff satisfaction. If staff are having to do supplemental things to go beyond because the rooms aren't laid out properly, that becomes not a very good working environment. So all those things fit into actually trying to, the whole proposal is to try and fit in with maximising the care home provision within an existing care home, and also then to try and endure its long-term survival and use by actually being fit for purpose for modern day needs. Now, the trade-off, as we know, we have the old vicarage, which we consider to be a non-designated heritage asset, which was a lovely building to see out from the front. I'm sure we all agree on that. But with the modern care home needs and the need to connect with the existing Staverton House and the need for straight lines and uniform-sized rooms, the opportunity for us to try to reflect some of the existing character of the old vicarage simply wasn't possible, unfortunately, not from a want of trying. Just forgot, as I updated you, we did actually try to find ways of whether we could actually retain an elevation of the old Vic, but as you saw, the building's proposed to be moved back. So if we kept the front elevation, for example, there would have to then be another 9 meters of building to reach it, and plus then the levels wouldn't match up with what we saw to be the intention to excavate to the ground level of Staverton House up to the new building line. So for those reasons, we have the application has evolved to this design and to this outcome. So this is the existing site plan, as you saw, with the top car park and then split with the bottom car park and the building to be demolished. These trees, most of these trees, I think, have been shown as the retained trees to be on the site. Just the elevation plans of Staverton House for context. And then the proposed site plan. Now, this has actually, forgive me, this is actually superseded with, we have actually now got a joint site plan with the visibility display plan that you saw on site, because it says 2 meter high fences here. That's actually now not part of their proposal, because as we saw, we knew that there's going to be a retaining wall here that's 1.9 meters above the ground level of the boundary with the neighbour. So that's actually not part of the proposals, but it was a site plan that didn't have the visibility displays on them of the cone, so forgive me for that. I'm sure you're aware of the red outline denoting the outline of the old vicarage, and then how the new proposal would integrate through. So there's the building on 3 levels, because as the ground gets excavated, it becomes the basement, and as we saw, the ground will then be levelled up from the point of the tree up to the new ground floor level, to which then becomes effectively the first floor and then the second floor. But so the buildings, both buildings will have 3 floors, but the front one will be fully basement below a new ground level. So this is not a cross-section plan, but a view from from New Terrace Road, which shows that the height of the old vicarage main roof at that level, and then the new ridge level below, and you can see how it relates in relation to both 50B and 52 on the other side. And then you can see at the background, the original Staverton Care House. One of the things we did manage to do in the negotiations at the early point was to propose to resalvage the stone of the old vicarage and to resalvage the central window here. And to try and create some kind of bay windows, but again, we are kind of limited with how we are limited with the architectural form they can take. But that is the attempt at trying to balance some retention of the historic fabric of the building into the new. So this is the elevation from it's from the eastern side. So this is from number 52, number 50B, from where we're in the back garden and on the balcony. So it can shows that the dotted line depicts the boundary line with neighbour, the increase in height that they will experience on the side, that 1.9 meters. And then you can see the excavation line. So everything underneath that red outline will then be excavated along with the demolition. And then that will become the new ground level. And then the land built up to become the new ground floor level. And then on the back will then be effectively the 3-story flat roof section, which will then link into Staverton. And that roof line is 1 meter higher than the ridge line of Staverton House. Notice the visual cones. One was a means has 2 functions to help break up the elevation, which is, as you see, is rather large. But we've got stone on the ground floor, brick on the top. I believe this is render. And then with these cones, the windows are looking at a 45-degree line. And then the same on the other side, from the western side for number 52, the same context. The blue line here was actually the original. As the application was first received, it had a large pitched roof on the top, which it was a part of the debate and part of the discussions that we had with the applicants as to whether do we go for a traditional roof that's more in keeping and integrating with the 2 buildings, or do we have a solution where we try to limit the potential impact on the neighbours? And it was agreed to then go with the flat roof option, as the flat roof section is sandwiched between the existing Staverton House and the proposed building, and you won't be able to see it readily from the new road at all. We went with the intention to try and limit that impact on neighbours. Just one other point, just to try and help break up, because there's going to be a parapet wall detail, just something that helps to help give a visual improvement to the building. So this is the rear elevation as you would look from, if you were behind Staverton House, you can see the flat roof section there, 1 meter above, but the flat roof then is obviously at the same eaves height of the proposed building. So this is the lower ground floor. That is essentially the ground floor of Staverton House, but this bit will then be the basement underground. Functional rooms, kitchen, laundry, changing rooms, that kind of thing, and then bedroom provision on the ground floor for the part of the new bed provision for the care rooms, and then on effectively the first floor is when we have the visual cones coming out. As you'll see, the actual windows are only on these side of the cones, and the first ones will then look there, arguably look there, and then there, and we'll come down to the next phase. But you see how they splay away. And then on the second floor, so we're on the roof of Staverton House and our other bedrooms and other rooms there. So this is a plan that we worked quite hard on to try and help with. When the application was first received, we were struggling with the spot height plans on the site, the spot heights on the site plan, not necessarily matching what we were seeing on the elevation drawings. So with very careful work of the planning agent and their architect, they were able to give us this detailed plan. So we actually are able to confidently say that the height, so this black line is the height of the neighbour, with the boundary with the neighbour at 50B. And that's service yard and the side and the access road will be 1.9 metres, and it's 2 metres here above the side of them. But as you see, then the bin store will be here, so it terminates halfway on the long side of their side elevation and then cuts. I'll go back to the site plan at the end, but it cuts in at the back and then goes further away. And you can see, so that's the height of the proposed new building. That's the height of the new ridge in terms of its massing in its context that way. We can come back to any questions on that one. And it's just to try and give you, because there's I don't know if you still can't see that, but I tried to actually try and give just a bit of better viewpoints of that. As you can see at the back of the site as well, there's no actual changes in levels, well, very subtle ones. But for some points of the 3-story element, it will be below the new actual, well, the existing ground level. Not by much, but it's some means of, because the building is going to be 9.6 meters high. So it's just important to take that into context. So on that boundary with 50B, one of the original proposals was that this service yard was going to terminate, was going to come up to here with a bin there. And as pointed out in the site visit, that would have been illuminated 2 meters over our neighbour at that point, which is why we've cut this section out, and it will be supposed to be have landscaping. We asked for an updated landscaping condition so that these trees are actually then evergreen trees and not deciduous ones to give them all year visual protection to help actually screen the bin store. And also, this is likely, because the staff room is in this bit section here, so it's likely that staff members will come out here, and probably if they are smokers, they'll probably hang around here. So the idea is to try and stop that any potential overlooking issues, if that is the case. And then that's just the picture of the bin store. So we've got a nice symmetric views as well, quite helpful just to try and show this site in some 3D correlation. The actual height of the boundary is actually, just make out there's a little line there that it actually will fade down at that point. But you can see the landscaping bit that we're trying to blend in here, and just to illustrate that, and also helps illustrate the 3-story context in relation to Staverton House. And that will be the view from the side boundary, the boundary fence, again putting that into perspective with the ridge height, changing the ridge heights to get the idea of the scale of the massing. So as we all know that the building is actually becoming closer to 50B in that context. Yes. Yeah, the side wall is actually coming closer than the where the conservatory was put. It was actually pointed out on the site visit, the front wall of the 3-story element was actually in line with the side wall of the old vicarage. So it was important, that was important to remember. So this is a cross section from the point where the 3-story building meets the new 2-story at the back of number 52's rear garden. Remember, so I was trying to show you the height differences. So there was I think it was about a meter gap, and then the ground will then slope down to our new start level there. And then equally, this is section B, which is in line with Staverton House along this line. So you can see along there, and then that's the building there. Sorry if I just missed something. I'll just point out that we're coming on to the next windows, we'll show the windows, but it demonstrates actually that gap is only, what do they say? It's at widest point is 9 meters, and then it narrows to 8.8, which is why we've asked for the obscure windows on this elevation. So a long side view from number 52, which we couldn't unfortunately see, but it shows that once those outbuildings are demolished, improvement there, but then, and then at the rear part of their garden, which terminates about here, that's when the new new element goes in its place. And again, just a nice isometric view, just to show. In hearing, is that better? I'll try and talk more loudly, but just conscious that if I talk, I don't want it to be too loud. The helpful isometric view from the number 52 side and from number 6 Smallbrook or Littlebrook, where we saw the side garden and the rear garden, just to give the context of the scale of what we saw at Staverton House and how then the new sections would be built in. And this is the sight lines from those windows. Applicants acknowledge that that gap is only 10 metres to the boundary. As we discussed on site, the planning inspectorate agreed to an open general rule of thumb that there should be 21 metres between habitable windows and 10.5 metres, half that distance, between first floor habitable windows and neighbours' garden boundaries. There's no set direction for when that becomes a second story. But the logic is that it has to be further, but it also depends on things like ground topography. So which is why on these, for these bedrooms, because in these we'll look out onto the side, garden and the front elevation windows of those houses, Councillor Parks, you pointed out to me on the site visit, which is why these windows for the first 1.6 metres will be obscurely glazed, and then with the frame running across the window, that takes it to 1.7, which is about roughly my chin height, which is a reasonable means of which to allow occupants still to be able to look out horizontally, but not down and into those neighbours' gardens, to give them a degree of outlook. But on the other side, because we've got 19 metres from an angle there to the garden boundary and 28 metres to the house, I haven't recommended putting those obscure glazing conditions on that one. And it's just to demonstrate the point. So the windows are the full lengths of the room to try and maximise the light into those rooms. But we have the obscure glass, which we put, I think I put a condition on to say it should be no less than level 5, but then the clear level on top, just to try and mitigate the two. Just to show the roof plan, it's going to have solar panels on the top, and it's just a parapet roof, detail of the parapet roof. There was this just shows the proposed landscaping plan, which shows the retain and proposed trees, but we've asked for an updated one of them to ensure where there needs to be evergreen trees, they are installed as such. So onto the photos, you'll remember from the view from this from the street scene, number 52, number 50B, and the old vicarage and the buildings to be demolished, and then that's the window that's been retained and reused, and then how the slight existingly slopes down, and our new site level will be roughly along this line. So the ground here will slope up to that new level. And then the view from that balcony down to the Staverton house. The new site, the side wall of that three-story extension will be roughly around there. And then the view of number 50B that doesn't have any side windows on its side elevation, but that's its balcony. And then the views looking up and across to number 12, where we also visited today. And it's just a hashed together, not 100% accurate view from the garden as we experienced. As we said, just to point out that three-story flat roof section will be on the same line as that gable end, so closer, and then 1 metre higher than Staverton House there. But obviously the two-story extension, the two-story front element will be obviously further over and closer still. And that's just the view from the balcony. And then further views as just to demonstrate the close proximity on the other side. And same with number 52. Just wanted to update on something else as well, just in terms of the report. For the recommendation, I've lost my notes, there they are. So on condition 10, I want to add on page 47. Yes, thank you. Well, actually, no, actually on page 48, I've got all means of enclosure within the site to include updated details of the retaining wall and adjacent to number 50's boundary and the means of enclosure on top. sorry, I should have pointed out that that retaining wall will follow. I initially thought it would follow the access road, but it's not. It's actually following that line there, near the boundary. So we wanted the details of that boundary wall because we haven't got that as a elevation plan. But what I wanted to do was add on number 52 as well, because at the moment they're about half a metre above them, and it is proposed to raise another 20 centimetres along there. So we just wanted to get those details and then agree the details of the top, any enclosures on top of that to be not then overbearing on number 52 itself. Ignore the 2 metre high fences, I've used the wrong plan there. But then I also want to add another condition, apologies, for a no dig condition in relating to all the retained trees, either that are on the site or our neighbours' sites. It had to be a pre-commencement condition, so no details, no commencement until we have that details. But also we'll have asked for details of the bridge over pin foundations for those, any new retaining walls, so they avoid the tree roots. The applicants have actually agreed to doing that, but it's just an additional thing just to ensure that trees that we saw on the sides that are going to be retained will then be retained in our final scheme.
So is that a new condition 20?
Yes. Apologise, I didn't think of it, missed it off in the draft. I think that's it, Chair. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cox. The next thing is members' questions. Do I see any members with questions? Councillor Seed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of the things that I was slightly concerned about when we went round, and I just want to explore the statutory requirement for it, is the number of translucent windows. Now, my concern is the quality of life of the people who are living there, for longer periods than people would be in a domestic setting. Are we required to insist on translucent windows, or is it a recommendation, or is it something that you'd rather put in because it's a planning inspectorate recommendation?
This is the obscure glazing.
Yeah.
Mr. Cox.
Yeah, so there's been a number of negotiations throughout this whole process, and this was one of the ones. Due to that general rule of thumb, but also due to the fact that along where those new windows are going to be, yes, we do have windows looking out of the existing rooms, but I'm sure some of it, I hope we agree that the fence obscured some of the view into the garden of number 52. We didn't have that potential look down and in or over the top. So as you asked the question of where those windows were in relation to here, unfortunately I can't. I'll try and find where that was, Councillor Newbury. You said on the site visit, where are those windows in here? I would be guessing at this moment in time where they are, but certainly we are introducing a new elevation. At the moment, number 52 look out onto a sloping roof, and we are adding 5 bedrooms on each floor within 8 and 9 metres of that boundary. So in my view, it's a means of balancing. Yes, I understand that the living accommodate needs of the people inside, which is why I've tried some officers would have perhaps asked for even more opaque glass than myself. And it has to be at a certain level that actually does the job it's intended to do, which is why I was keen to say my chin height, because it will prevent me from, if I'm in the back of the room, I would certainly not be able to look down and into the neighbour's garden. I would be able to still, if I put my head in and deliberately did it. But most people wouldn't want to try to do that. So it's trying to balance the two competing needs.
Does that answer the question, Councillor Seed?
I know Mr. Cox has put a huge amount of work in, and the detail came out during the planning, during the visit. It's just a slight concern for the living conditions of those who will be living there, noting that there are several residential dwellings quite close where that would not meet that standard with their clear windows.
Anything to
Even
add?
if you reversed the situation.
Let's go
I know
back to
that's
David.
not, this is not a popular area to be going down, but that my concern is that, you know, people who spend a very long time in a small room and can't see out.
David Cox.
Yes, that is a competing argument. But the court, so overlooking issues come under CP 57 of the core strategy, and it requires a high level of design in its impacts of overlooking. I can't sit here before you and say if without that obscure glazing, so it would actually lead to the adverse overlooking of those neighbours had, in my view, if that obscure glazing isn't there, I probably wouldn't be here before you. I probably have delegated a refusal, in my view. It does seem, it will probably be, it would seem unfair to, well, it's a lot of application to do on one reason for refusal. But it's an important point that we still have to acknowledge that we have got strong neighbour objections. And originally, my original, when this application came in, my initial one was to have obscure glazing on both sides. It's only after negotiation and a lot of consideration to omit them from the other side, from the western side, the eastern side.
Okay, I think I've got the answer that you're going to give me.
Okay. I have a question, Mr. Cox. I see that the conservation officer is objecting to the demolition because it means the loss of an important village building. When we were on site, you pointed to a particular window and you were saying that it would be recycled. The stone of the exterior, or some of the stone of the exterior walls would be recycled, and this particular window would be sort of rescued and recycled. I can't see it in any of the drawings of the elevations of the new building. Can you tell us where it is?
So that's the window. You can see the stone detailing. That's the one on the front elevation.
Okay, it's
there's a
not the
triple
one I thought
glazed-
you were pointing to.
There's a triple glazed panel, and all of that should be reclaimed stone.
So where has that window come from?
I think it's the one on the front elevation. Sorry, gone the wrong way.
Chair, the one he pointed to was the one right in the middle at the front.
Yeah, I've got a photo of it that I skipped over.
First floor.
This one.
Okay, that's fair enough. I thought it was the one on the left that you were pointing to, David, so I misunderstood you. Okay, and then, well, the rest, I think, is a matter for the debate. Are there any other questions? Oh, yeah, I see Councillor Davis and also Councillor Wickham and also Councillor Parks. And also, let's take those three first. Councillor Davis. Okay, so should we go to Councillor Wickham and then Councillor Davis and then Councillor Parks? And Councillor Viger. I'm sorry if I'm getting you in the wrong order, but you will all have your go. Councillor Wickham first then.
Thank you, Chair. On 9.3.3, it states that 20 parking spaces would be available. On that note, can I just ask, is that for staff and visitors? And subsequent to that, how many visitors would be expected at the most popular time of visiting? I'm guessing a Saturday afternoon, I don't know, but can I just ask that? Thank you.
Okay, so I checked the parking data. So we have maximum parking standards for businesses, and it requires one space for every 4 beds and then one space for every 2 members of staff. So we've got 56 beds, so which will equate to 28 spaces. Actually 13 spaces. And then we do actually have, there's a difference here. So it's proposed to have 56 members of staff on site, 56, but in the transport assessment, because there's shift work, because it's a 24-hour care, you have kitchen staff coming in 2 shifts, and then you have your 6 till 2, 2 till 10, and then you have your night shift through. So the numbers of staff will be changing each time. On the figures that we've been given and the anticipated model of what they're working on, there'll be 20 staff on site at any one time, at the most. So when you add, under that, that's, sorry, I've written it down badly here. I think it's I've calculated that it'll be a maximum parking need of 23 spaces on that basis, not the 24 that's the maximum need. Now, the parking standard doesn't include visitor spaces for care homes there as well, I don't think. So the whole point of it is to encourage businesses and staff members to find alternative means to get to work. So that's why we have actually got cycle racks and shower facilities for staff. I take the point on visiting. It's I'm sure actually the agent is going to, and the applicants are going to cover this in their 3 minutes better than I can. But I think it's a working assumption that managers of the care home don't want complaints of people not being able to park on site. And I think they kind of self-regulate it themselves and arrange for convenient times when people can be visited. I know that's a bit of a wishy-washy cop-out, but the maximum parking standards only allows us for 23 spaces and we're providing 20.
Do you mean there are limited visiting hours?
Actually, I don't actually know what the visiting hours are. I hope that will be raised, but my understanding from my discussions with them throughout this process is that the parking on site now is done on a kind of a understanding basis with family members as to when convenient times are available. Because the last thing they want to be dealing with is people saying, I can't visit because there's no parking spaces. It kind of doesn't work very well. I hope that be answered in the 3-minute
Thank you.
Okay, well, the members of the public are hearing what you're saying, David, and it would be helpful if they could clarify that. Are there any other, I beg your pardon, I'd forgotten we got 4 more. Councillor Davis. Sorry, does that answer your question, Councillor Wickham?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Davis, then.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Seed and myself were on the same wavelength with talking about these obscure glass windows. Particularly on the site visit, I pointed out that the current property can be deemed to be overlooked. The windows looking out the window of the current property could be deemed to be overlooked. Can I just ask if the officer could put up can we do the drawing of the where you've got the views, the view triangles, please? Yeah, thanks. Okay, I just wondered the relevance of on one elevation you've got all the views looking at the same way. Now I know this is probably just changing somebody's architectural plan, but in the other one you've got the views pointing the other way, which is actually pointing towards one of the properties that we'll be claiming overlooking. And I do think that somewhere along the line, I feel for the people that may have to have those rooms in having the obscure glass. And so that's, if the angles, I'm asking for the plan to be changed. Maybe in this particular plan, the windows, in my view, maybe are looking the wrong way. But I'll leave it with that. But and I will confirm. So we're saying obscure glass up to the space bar, but after the space bar, translucent or regular glass? So it says translucent, but that I presume is just regular glass.
That's my basic understanding. Translucent is clear glass. So I don't know if that's ignorance, but clear glass is the view.
It's still not enough visibility, in my opinion. And yeah.
Well, there are options to change. If, for example, you wanted these 2 rooms to look out this way, we can. Well, you can put, notwithstanding the approved plan, you can say these rooms, that window shall have its cone looking that way. But I would still then recommend obscure glazing for those.
Okay, so we have Councillor Parks, and then Councillor Viger. Is there anyone else waiting to speak? I don't see any other hands, so Councillor Parks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank officers for the report. This is a complex application that we have here before us. Certainly the officer has answered one of my queries in his presentation I raised after our site visit. And we've heard a lot about the obscured glass and the overlooking, which is important, but I have a small concern about the staff restroom and the opportunity for them to go outside onto the balcony, which was shown on one of the slides there. And my question really is if that is at second floor level and staff went out onto the balcony, how that might interact with the nearby property and their balcony and the likes. So I have some concerns on that aspect of it. Thank you.
You mean this balcony? Yeah.
And indeed, if the possibility, I understand they have to have a restroom, outside smoking, and the likelihood of any noise and interaction and the effect on the neighbouring property there. Thank you.
We don't actually have a designated smoking area. Sorry, we don't actually have a designated smoking area as part of the proposal, because I think logically it will end up being there. We could actually have a smoking shelter somewhere else, but human beings are inherently lazy and wanting convenience, so they'll just go outside where the door is from the staff room and just go there. We believe that with a landscaping scheme to be updated, we should be able to provide a level protection, but there is potential to then try and put, as part of the boundary treatments, a screen there. Because it's away from the boundary at least. If we put a screen there, we could prevent people from directly, from
If I may, Chair, yeah, I can understand the screening and the planting and the evergreen trees, but I'm just wondering if there were half a dozen staff out there talking on the veranda, what the effect that might have on the nearby property.
My understanding is that probably wouldn't. I imagine the care staff are running off their feet busy, and it will only be your normal half an hour lunch breaks, however, I don't know how the shift patterns work, but with people, I haven't anticipated that being a particular problem, no.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Viger.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, sorry for going back on this and others have got there before me, but these cones, am I correct in thinking there was a pane of glass on both sides?
Originally, yes, but then it's been, they're only on those planes where we got the displays coming out from.
So that one at the top on the left is facing back towards the neighbouring house rather than down the garden?
This one?
No, the top one. The top one on the left, that one, yeah.
Yeah, both of these two are.
Why would it face that way and not southwards?
Because this is a side garden as well, as we saw.
Okay.
So we'll have the same problem that way. It's however we try to balance it out. Well, I can't tell the applicants what to do, but this is the final version that was received.
Okay. Second question is, in the report, you have some data around people with dementia. It's called Carterwood data. And I don't quite understand it. I don't know if anybody can talk through exactly what that
In the
means.
consultation response,
It's in the officer's report. It's called Carterwood data, and it sort of gives some numbers on people with dementia. It seems to be indicating a kind of, I guess, an ideal optimal supply level. It puts in the postcode of this place at the beginning and comes out with a number of 150 something. And I'm just, it's a supply quantity, dementia beds 156. And it's, I look at all the numbers there and I'm not understanding what it's saying.
unfortunately, I can't answer that because it's come from our adult care services team. I don't wish to push any pressure on Councillor Davies whether she can shed any further light on that
Okay.
when she speaks. I'm sorry.
Perhaps maybe when she speaks,
I don't know. I don't know if that comes under your, I'm unable to extrapolate what this any further.
I mean, just to explain the context in which I'm saying this, it seems to me that there is a balance to be struck here between the demands of the policy which says we should favour older people and find spaces for people with dementia. That is clearly a planning policy that we have, which should be respected. There's a balance between that and core policy 57, I think, on design, which is about built form and responding to the existing landscape. If one was to only look at the dementia-related policy, you might say we could have a 6-storey building here because you get more and more beds in. But 3 clearly is where the balance is being struck on this. And I suppose what I'm wondering is, A, is there any more information on the demand for beds for people with dementia in this particular locality? And B, is there any tool that you would use to sort of calibrate core policy 57, particularly where it says we're responding positively to the existing townscape landscape features in terms of building layout, built form, height, mass, scale? Do you make a subjective analysis on the basis of that criterion, or is there any I'm not asking you to use a slide rule, but is there any tool that officers use to try to figure out whether an application conforms to that criterion or not?
It's subjective after careful consideration of everything and then trying to balance up. I don't know, I can't quantify the need because these figures I don't really know, but we know there's a need in Wiltshire and nationally, and specifically for specialised dementia care, which this place already provides. So yes, but balancing that up against CP50, everything in CP57 is a subjective consideration, which we all come to.
Do we have any other members of the committee or the council who would like to ask any questions to David Cox? I don't see anyone indicating. So that takes us on then to the open forum. And after we've heard from Mr. Finn, Mr. Anderson, who are both objectors, Ashley Jones, Claire Turner, and Rob Gillespie, who are representing the applicant, we then have Councillor Jane Davis, who is a member of the council who's interested in adult care. And then we will go into debate because the local member is a member of the committee. So do we have Mr. Finn standing by? Okay, have you worked out how to press a button and get a red light? And over to you then, Mr. Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Finn. My wife and I have lived next door to the old vicarage since 2015 in 50B. This statement reflects our views and those of the other residents. In principle, we have no problem with the redevelopment of the old vicarage and Staverton House facilities and recognise the need for such facilities within the community. The glaring issue, which we and others have repeatedly stated, is the scale of what is proposed and its suitability on this site. 12 months ago, we had a meeting with the new owner of the site to go through the plans and gain our feedback. At the meeting, he stated that he was having problems engaging with Wiltshire Planning Department and as a result had instructed his architects to design the maximum size development in order to get their attention. At this meeting, the discrepancies in the ground levels were also pointed out to the developer. This initial design has been subject to minor modifications in the last 12 months in response to almost 100 comments made. None of these minor modifications have addressed the concerns, and the current design remains largely unchanged. The site has subsequently been resurveyed, but the discrepancies in ground level still remain. If unresolved, this could lead to subsidence, ground slippage, potential flooding, rodent infestation due to the new position of the bin store, which is now close to our boundary, and our balcony, as it's been put. Due to the increasing capacity of the home, the reduction of the car parking capacity and have a serious impact on the already busy B3105, causing danger to all road users, including children going to local schools. Wiltshire Highways have recommended on the car park, recommended on the car parking capacity, but I don't see that they have taken into account what happens at shift change when double the staff numbers will be on site. The impact on the surrounding properties in terms of noise, disturbance, loss of light and immunity and road safety cannot be underestimated. Repeatedly, the Planning Office report mainly identifies the detrimental effects on and notes them, and then dismisses them. We suggest that these should be considered together, not individually, as has been done. The old vicarage in itself is a building of historic interest and was identified by Pippa Carr and is over 160 years old. The nearby Smallbrook House, which is a similar age, shows how sympathetic restoration can be achieved. We think that this should be also considered the development of the old vicarage. To summarise, the development is too large, not in keeping the surrounding area, and will have a detrimental effect on the local residents. We hope the committee will reject this proposal as it stands. Thank you.
I beg your pardon, we got Mr. Anderson next. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Eric Anderson, as you know. My wife Vivian and I live at 12 Smallbrook Gardens, which is immediately next door to and facing directly towards the development site on the east elevation. We've lived there since 2015. We entirely agree with, thank you, and share all of the views expressed in the statement read by Mr. Finn of 50B. I have read the report by Mr. Cox, which identifies at least 4 main properties, including ours, which are adversely affected by the proposal. However, it contains many photographs taken of and from 3 of those houses, but apparently none of ours, certainly none taken from our house. There are a few passing comments about the effect on us, but these are largely then immediately dismissed. And we feel very strongly that during the consultation period, we've been largely ignored, despite the many detailed comments that we did post online. Up until today, no one from the planning department has visited us or asked to visit us. But I was pleased to see that they took the time today, so thank you for doing that. I have also tried to point out on many occasions that our house does face directly towards the site. We would therefore face head-on to the main 3-story central block and would bear the full brunt of the visual impact, the invasion of privacy from all 4 of those transparent windows, by the way, and the potential for excessive light pollution that this huge new facade will inevitably bring to us. The requirement for partial opaque glazing, which we originally requested and was promised to us by Ashley Jones, has now been removed from that elevation, but still remains there for the benefit of those on the western elevation. I've added a note here, but there was a debate about noise from staff. Even now, we are frequently woken at 7 a.m. by the noise of staff coming and going and greeting and saying goodbye to their colleagues, which is fine, they have to do that, but it's usually very noisy, even now. Having said that, my wife and I question the validity of this report and its recommendations when it seems that we have been largely ignored and essentially omitted from it. I don't know how it's possible to claim that the impact on us has been properly assessed and fully understood when no one has ever bothered to visit us in more than a 12-month period until today. I realize a lot of effort's gone into the preparation of the report, but we feel it's fatally flawed with unjustifiable claims of benefits and the playing down of the impact on us and our other neighbours. So we reject and refute the majority of the claims made in this report, and we urge the committee to do the same. The proposal is simply far too large for the existing site in all respects. And I would say, as the old saying goes, you can't put a quart into a 1-pint pot. report, by the way, for anybody who's fortunate to be young enough not to know what it is £2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Yeah, there is a whole generation, though I think not very many people in the room, who don't know what a quart is. Thank you for that. The next speaker then is Mr. Ashley Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'll address one or two of the points that came across. It's quite difficult to find exact demand figures for dementia in the area, but I think we all know the stories in the national, the regional, and the local press. What I can say for sure is Staverton House is constantly full, and the phone is constantly rung off the hook by the local authority looking to place people. We all know there's an aging population out there. We're all living longer and with much more complex needs. It can be overwhelming, but we cannot ignore the challenge. Social care has always played a poor cousin to the NHS, but they're now waking up to this. They're waking up to the problems that we see and that we have in social care. Our elderly are increasingly finding themselves in hospital. In Wiltshire, over the last 2 years, we've had 11 closures of care beds and only 5 have opened. The average size of those care homes was 21 beds, exactly the same size as the old vicarage that you all saw today. So you can ask yourselves, why are these closing when there is so much demand? And the reason is obsolescence. They're not fit for purpose any longer. As you all saw, the corridors are too narrow, they're over a number of different stories, and modern care looks very different. We've been running care homes now for about 8 years or so, and we understand the pressures. Staverton House is a purpose-built specialist dementia care home, one of very few in the county, but that too is only 20 beds. What we're proposing is to create a strong future for specialist dementia care in the area and continue supporting the local authority who find our service invaluable. We want to prevent the erosion of local services by building on a brownfield site and extending the success we've enjoyed at Staverton House. We need to build a viable extension that has a future. And to do that, we have to end up with a certain number of beds, or it simply doesn't work. No one out there today builds a care home of less than 60 beds. Not only will this secure employment of the 45 staff we currently have on site, but it'll create another 20 to 30 jobs at a time when the country looks as if it may be heading into recession and the associated unemployment that comes with it. Our staff will work in a modern environment, fit for purpose, and have the chance to continue providing the excellent care that they're known for. Was a question that came out earlier, and I'd just like to address that very quickly. We meet all the regulations. I haven't got the figures to hand, but we meet all the regulations that there are that require a certain element of parking. Any new build scheme, which is 60 or 70 beds, generally has between 20 and 25 car parking spaces. So with our 52 beds, we adequately meet that.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. You are over time.
Okay.
Could you wind up?
Lastly, I'd just like to thank all the work that we've done over the last 14 months with the planning officer. It's a difficult job, and we fully appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next speaker then is Claire Turner, who is Manager of Service.
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to share with you a little bit about Staverton House and what we do. There is no service like us within the area. We are the only specialist dementia care home that I am aware of. I've been a registered manager for more than 7 years. The service we provide is unique within our area, and we pride ourselves in placing residents with complex dementia and supporting them to live contented with their dementia diagnosis. We support our local authority with placing patients from local hospitals when we have vacancies, and with more beds, we'd be in a position to support the local authority to alleviate bed blocking within our local hospitals, which is currently a huge problem nationwide. We have a high proportion of local authority beds. Currently, 50% of our residents are funded through the local authority. We are a specialist dementia care home, and I believe that there is no other home in the area that accommodates solely dementia residents. The demand for beds have become greater, and this has been highlighted with the effects of the pandemic. As people are returning to a normal way of life, families are struggling to find the right placements for their loved ones and homes that will accept their loved ones with complex behaviours and needs. We have the local authority sending us assessments for placements daily, which we have to turn down as we cannot meet the growing demand. This site used to be 41 beds. However, 21 of these beds were just not suitable to accommodate complex care. 20 beds that we still have are always full, and we find ourselves in a situation of turning the local authority and local inquiries away as we are unable to meet the growing need for beds. Our service is different to many others. We are well known for taking failed placements from other homes in our local area and then becoming successful placements at Staverton House. We also find that as we accommodate failed placements that have been residing in another home for at times many years, the staff within those homes do not have the experience, training or support to manage such advanced and complex behaviours, and the placement breaks down. We have then assessed and accommodated these residents to live within Staverton House for the remainder of their life with the right support for themselves and their families. The local authorities know and can confirm we accommodate complex and failed placements. I managed the old vicarage for several years, and within this time I experienced the challenges of the design and meeting residents' needs. The elderly are now encouraged to remain at home for as long as possible. And I found that residents' needs were much greater upon admission, which resulted...
Enough to remember quarts and pints, so I know what that looks like if I see one. My practice was requested to assist with progressing the application following the initial submission and favourable response to the draft scheme from your authority when it was the subject of a pre-application submission. The application had, however, stalled due to officer concerns. Following an initial site visit, we advised the applicant that we agreed with a range of concerns identified by your authority's case officer, David Cox, and set about responding to them through a series of detailed discussions and the submission of revised application material. And I would like to personally thank David Cox for his diligence and positive approach in reaching what we all agree is now an acceptable scheme. It is a scheme which will deliver considerable benefit in the form of much needed additional dementia care accommodation. I think in all of this, it's critically important to acknowledge that rarely, if ever, do local planning authorities allocate land specifically for care or extra care homes. So it's inevitable that you're going to end up with remodelling those that do exist in an attempt to meet today's more modern care home standards. The Wiltshire Core Strategy, however, has an enabling policy, Core Policy 46, and this is explicitly supportive in relation to accommodation for vulnerable people. Through working in partnership with your officer, the scheme before you is regarded as entirely compatible with its surroundings. And I must say, having heard Mr. Finn and the other objector, I must point out that we visited each and every of the concerns that were raised and took a great deal of care in making sure we responded to those concerns. And that is why the scheme went through what I believe were some quite fundamental changes once we were engaged to advise the applicant. No one can deny that there will be change, however. The amenity conditions of those residents living immediately adjacent to the site have been at the forefront of the revisions made to the scheme. We have in particular revised the scheme to reduce the scale and mass of the built form and considerably reduce the opportunity for overlooking through elevational revisions to the central section and paid particular attention to boundary detailing and levels. And in that relationship, I must point out that we were aware of the potential for disturbance from staff using the staff opportunity for disturbance outside the building, and we set that back from the adjoining property with every intention of reducing any unacceptable extent of intrusion. In all of this, however, it's critically important to provide a modern care home which meets today's pressing needs resulting from an ageing population, which also delivers both a pleasant and comfortable environment for both residents and a working environment for the care staff. A satisfactory assimilation of the scheme with the residential amenity has been achieved. The planning balance must now apply substantial weight to the considerable benefit which will be achieved through the delivery of increased specialist dementia care capacity. I seek your endorsement of your officer's recommendation of approval. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to all of the speakers in the open forum. And that takes us on to Councillor Jane Davis, who is the Wiltshire Council Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, and she would like to say a few words on this planning application. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just keep it very simple, which is to reiterate that this is an area, specialised dementia care is an area of shortage in Wiltshire at the current time and will continue to grow and become an area that needs more beds provided over the time. I agree with Councillor Vigar's comments about the Carterwood table being a bit inexplicable, but they are market specialists, they're sector specialists in this area in projecting demand, and our commissioning teams work with them. They also use Poppy and Pansy and various other services to identify need. We are, as a council, looking, it's mentioned in the budget papers, a capital bid to build our own dementia care homes, because not only do we need more, but they need to be the right sort of provision. It's been mentioned already, you need to have space for hoists and equipment, you need to be able to have washing and toilet facilities, you need a building that's suitable for lifts for people on bed to go up and down. And it's not something that, unfortunately, in this instance, that can be retrofitted into historic buildings. I believe we've lost some beds already at this care home because of their inability to provide the right sort of care in the spaces that they have within the existing vicarage structure. Our demand is only going to increase. You'll see some of our own data is talking about by 2040 an increase of 46%. So it is a very real and pressing need. And, you know, I do appreciate the concerns of neighbours who feel their amenity will be diminished by this, but I have to speak as a cabinet member for people of Wiltshire, and heaven forbid that any of us do develop complex dementia needs. It's a really unhappy, unpleasant disease to have. The care workers who work with people like that are extremely skilled, very proficient. I would say we need local, in-county provision, not just because we can keep our council costs down. We have to have practical boundaries around what we spend, but also in terms of relatives being able to have ease of visiting their loved ones. That's it. Thank you.
Want to come back, Councillor Davis?
No, yes, I do. As a point of information, a point maybe for a legal officer on this. Are we almost like a partner in this application? The fact that we, if it had been a school, it would have had to go into strategic planning because it would be something relevant to us here. I'm in two minds now that whether, now that, no disrespect to the cabinet member for speaking at this meeting, but she's come along to speak this meeting to say that Wiltshire Council needs these beds, and we are making a decision on what is a private application that we could technically be a partner of, and I have a little bit of a concern about that, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, if you think that we need legal advice, do we have any legal officer?
Can I be very clear that this isn't a partnership arrangement? I'm simply here to say that there is a demand for this type of bed. We have, it appears we already do commission beds from there, but we have very strict commissioning procedures. My speaking today is just about general demand, and that has to sit as a piece of information alongside, you know, what it says in the local plan. But there is no partnership between us in developing this.
Andrew, did you want us to see if we could get
I've said my piece. That's I think for that reason, I think I know which way I
mean, I have to say, when it was put to me that we let Jane Davis speak, I couldn't see any great harm in it. It did strike me that the new code of conduct, but it's up to all members whether they declare an interest or not, And I would, I mean, I don't know, Jane, whether you would like us to record that you have declared that you are the cabinet member for adult social
Yes,
care?
please do declare that. You can
I think that's
you can
probably
also declare I have no pecuniary interest,
Yes.
and I have been clear about
I think
demands.
that is just to cover you. I think if we
Yeah,
were,
thank you.
Kieran,
That's
if you
great.
could
Yeah,
minute that Jane is declaring that she is the adult community care cabinet member, but she has no direct pecuniary interest. Can you do that? I think just in case anybody did try to make an issue. I don't think we all individually, even if Wiltshire Council were to end up using most of the beds in the existing home or an enlarged one, I don't think we all, as individual Wiltshire Council, I can't see how we could all possibly have a conflict of interest. It's just that we need to perhaps be quite clear that we're keeping an open mind on this. Are you happy, Andrew? Or would you like us to get a legal officer?
I'm seeing other councillors nodding and doing parts of bits and pieces. I don't know if we should have some sort of legal ruling on this.
Well, I tell you what, do we in fact have a legal
I'm not trying
officer?
trying to muddy the water, but I've been doing planning a fair amount of time, and I know sometimes there's interests of council when council interests are involved in planning applications. And I take on board what we're saying, that we're not a partner in this scheme, but we intend to probably, it's been said that there is a need for this, and Wiltshire needs, Wiltshire residents need that need.
I tell you what, Andrew, how would it be if we hear from Kieran Elliott? Because he is the Democratic Services Officer who supports the monitoring officer, and I think he may have some helpful thoughts. How about that?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a reasonable point to raise because it's not usual for a cabinet member to speak at a planning committee, either whether it's an application from Wiltshire Council or not. However, it's not unprecedented. I've certainly seen in other applications around the county a cabinet member whose perhaps area of their portfolio may touch upon an issue. And in effect, since it's not a Wiltshire Council application and we're not in partnership, all it is any other member, as with any other member of the council, they're coming to you, they're mentioning the capacity in which they're speaking and saying, I have a general view. You shouldn't give that, you should give that what weight you consider appropriate. And the fact that it's been declared what capacity that is, I think is reasonable. I don't think, I appreciate the new code, as you say, is a little bit more complicated on these matters, but as she's not a decision maker, that makes it simpler. I don't see any reason why you can't proceed. If you did want to get a sort of legal view, we would probably have to adjourn, and I'm not sure who is around. But as I said, it's not unprecedented for portfolio holders or others, which is why the procedure allows other members to speak if it's considered appropriate. Anybody with an interest in this area could speak with your permission.
Thank you, Karen. I will bring you in, Jonathan. I'd just like to make one other point, which has struck me, and that is that we as a Wiltshire Council Planning Committee could determine this, even if it were an application by Wiltshire Council. We do that all the time. Applications by the council come to a council planning committee because they are made by the council, so they can be dealt with in public. So I think that might be another helpful factor. Councillor Seed.
I think which committee they ought to or might go to is arguing is our own internal issue, not a legal issue. We have sat here and discussed applications for children's homes, and I can remember one being discussed in Melksham a couple of years ago, without any difficulty at all. I think perhaps the difference is that we've had an interest from a cabinet member who is looking at the care or the service being provided by this private organisation. And personally, I'm quite comfortable that we do continue to discuss this. I don't see that this is any conflict of interest, and I would urge that we do take this forward to a determination.
Okay. Well, these papers are run past. We had a member of the legal team who looked at the agenda papers, and I think she had the opportunity to flag up any concerns that she had about the way we were planning to deal with it, Andrew. So I think unless other members have any concerns, perhaps we can carry on as we are. It's just a little unfortunate that usually we have one of the legal services with us, and today we don't. But I think I'm hearing reasonable confidence. Kenny, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I did have a chat with Charlotte Purkis before today's meeting, and
Oh, that's great.
although we didn't specifically talk about the potential partnership or future use that Wiltshire Council may make of some of the provision, she made it quite clear that she didn't identify any legal issues within the park, and I certainly didn't ahead of the chairman's briefing last week. And just to reiterate what you've heard from the cabinet member herself, because this application is submitted by the applicant, it's not an application either in partnership with the council or any direct association with the council. We are, as an authority, are open to assess this on its own merits. And as Councillor Seed has mentioned, and others in the room will probably be aware of, applications do come before this area committee where there may be a future tie-in, but you're only assessing the planning merits here, not on the future occupancy of the building, or whether those occupancy come via the council or not. That's a separate discussion and matter. It's not really a planning concern, and that's what I would suggest, Chair, is what members concentrate on today.
Thank you, Kenny. Well, back to you, Andrew. I mean, if you would like us to get a legal officer in, we'll try. But are you happy for us to proceed, having heard from Kenny Green? You are. Okay. Let's carry on then. So are there any other...
Sorry, Claire, can I just say, the decision whether to proceed or not is not really down to me. I just asked a question, a point of order, or you could say as a point of thing. It's not down to me whether we discuss that. I would just say, and I was not, I will repeat, not taking a pop at our cabinet member for coming along to address the committee, as if to say she should have had a declaration of interest. That's not what I was trying to say.
No, that's great. I mean, I have to... Similar thoughts cross my mind, particularly as we've changed our code of conduct. But I think I'm reasonably happy. And I mean, the point there really was that my view is that when a member of a committee asks for legal advice, usually other members should be willing to go along with it. It's just unlucky we don't have anyone on hand. But Kenny was able to tell us that he did discuss this with Charlotte Purkis, and that she didn't see an issue there. Okay, so I think we're more or less ready to go into debate now. Does any other member have any questions before we go into debate? In that case, the local member is Councillor Trevor Carbin, and he called this in, so I'm going to go straight over to him. And it would be helpful, Trevor, if you were able to move something, but if not, I'll ask the next speaker to do that.
I shall be moving something, Chair, in a moment. So first, just you mentioned a few corrections at the beginning. There's just one more, is that in the heading, it's described as Hilperton Parish Council. It actually comes under Staverton Parish Council, as you'll have seen.
I think David did correct himself on that.
Did you mention
David?
that one?
Yes,
Oh, did you? Sorry, I missed that one.
You
Yeah.
missed him correcting and apologising for that already.
Okay. Thanks for coming out this afternoon, and thanks to you, Chair, for booking in the site visit without having to go through the routine of bringing it here first and then deferring for a site visit. That was good move, so well done, and thanks for doing that. And thanks also to the officers for dealing with what's been a very difficult application, and as you'll have seen from the report, effectively redesigning it really over the last year or so from what was originally submitted. So we've had consultations gone out on the 11th of November 21, May 22, October 22, December 22, with the final version of the revised description and the plan changes. So a lot of work and a lot of stress for the residents as well, because they've had to live with this for the last 12 months or so. Consider whether that's the proper use of planning officers' time, but that's another matter, I guess. The history and heritage of this site, as you've seen, it was the old vicarage. It was the first building in this part of Staverton. The construction of it was actually a community effort. It was built with donations from the local landowners and the residents and clergy. The tradesmen and businesses of Staverton gave their services for free to get it built. They put out an appeal in 1860 for that, and the building was actually occupied in early 1861. So it's taking them less time to appeal, construct, plan, and build than it's taken us just to get through the planning process. The information that came from Pete Lavis, who was a former chairman of the parish council, who wrote a book on the history of Staverton. So again, just staying with that for a moment, the building, according to the officer's report, is prominent in the street scene. It contributes to the local sense of place, an important part of the history of Staverton. A good example of a formal Victorian building, Gothic architectural style, contributing to its significance as a non-designated heritage asset. It represents an important part of the small village's history. It positively contributes to the local area and forms an important part of the semi-rural street scene. And again, the MPPF encourages us to take account of things like that. It says the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application. In weighing applications that directly or indirectly affect non-designated heritage assets, a balanced judgment will be required, having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. And our own core policy 58 says much the same: development should protect, conserve, and where possible enhance the historic environment. Designated heritage assets and their settings will be conserved, and where appropriate, enhanced in a manner appropriate to their significance. And that includes buildings and structures of special architectural or historic interest, distinctive elements of Wiltshire's historic environment, including non-designated heritage assets which contribute to a sense of local character and identity, will be conserved and where possible enhanced. You've seen the context of the building. It marks a change perhaps from the scene on New Terrace. It's called New Terrace. It's not a terrace. It's actually a series of semis with a very strong building line. And then on the other side, we get this mixture of the old and the new houses in Smallbrook and going down towards the canal. Let's just consider the need for this. We've heard from the cabinet member. We've seen in the report the adult services officers gets 3.5 pages of the report, so quite a big chunk. A lot of the data there is clearly out of date. I think it refers to 2014 as being sometime in the future, doesn't it? It's old data, but some of the trends were a bit questionable as well. But the basic premise that we need this type of facility, nobody's going to argue with. I think it's worth remembering, though, that we are a planning committee. We're not a social services committee. It's not our job to provide these facilities. It's our job to judge whether this application in this case is one which is suitable for construction or not. Did you also mention in the corrections core policy 46 as opposed and not 49? Did you get that one? Okay, well, I've got that one. That's the one that's about meeting the needs of Wiltshire's vulnerable and older people. And it says the provision in suitable locations and new housing to meet the specific needs of vulnerable and older people will be required. That's what it says in the report. It then goes on to say, which is not in the report, wherever practicable, accommodation should seek to deliver and promote independent living. So clearly that sentence is about independent living, which this is not. There are, though, further items in the policy encouraging development of residential homes where appropriate. But again, there's nothing in the policy which has the capacity to override the normal planning considerations of good design and neighbouring amenity. So the submission of the adult services officer should, I think, be given little weight in planning terms. Going on to the design, and again, we're talking about core policy 57 and PPF para 126. It is large and overbearing. I think the evidence for that is really in the report. All those illustrations that you've seen, especially those isometric ones, just show how big and overwhelming it would be. And the changes over the last year have probably led to some improvements, but it still remains large and overbearing, as we've heard from the people who live around it. We've seen the point that was raised about the windows. I think Councillor Seed made a very good point. We often ask for obscure glazing, don't we, on various properties that come forward where there's a possibility of overlooking. but we never asked for the entire property to be obscure glazed. We wouldn't ask anybody to live in a house with totally obscure glazing. And yet that's almost what we're asking the people who are going to be living in these rooms to be having to put up with. And I think the fact that that difficulty exists, the fact that it's impossible to reconcile, you can't have it all clear because then you have overlooking, so therefore you have to have it obscure, therefore you have a poor living environment for the people who are going to be in the property. And the fact that we have that contradiction really means that there's a simple answer to that, which I'll be coming on to in a moment. I mentioned the bulk of the proposal. The footprint, I think, is not a problem in itself. It's going from 540 to 625 square meters, so no big deal on that. But it's the overall bulk, the material increase, which is referred to in the report, especially that three-story element. The point about overlooking, we have, as you've seen on the site visit, it's surrounded by properties, certainly on two sides. You've got the road on one side, Staverton House on the other side. There are properties on the Staverton House side, but they're obviously not directly affected because they've got Staverton House in the way. But you've got 6 Littlebrook, 52 New Terrace, 50, 50A, 50B, New Terrace, 11 and 12 Smallbrook Gardens, and it's a cumulative impact on all of those properties that we have to consider. The report dismisses each individual disbenefit, but say we need to look at it as a whole, consider the whole picture. And say, while the proposal, oh yeah, that's a quote from the report. The proposal would cause some harm to the front garden of number 50B through potential noise, overlooking and car fumes. And then the officer says it's not considered that would be sufficient to warrant refusal. But say my proposal is that when you add them all together, then it does become so. The highways points you've heard about, there are probably traffic implications on this. The parish council has a long-standing concern about the volume of traffic, including lorries coming through the villages, which is why they've included that in their representation. But we've also seen the point from the highways officer who says that it's not going to make too much difference in terms of the overall traffic movements, so I won't attempt to include that in the reasons in a moment, Chair. So I think I've covered the main points that I wanted to cover. So I'll just come on to a proposal. I would like to propose that we refuse the application, Chairman, on 2 reasons. One is amenity. By reason of its bulk and design, the proposal would cause an unacceptable impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties in conflict with CP 57 of the Wiltshire Core Strategy and paragraph 130 of the NPPF. A reminder, the core policy 57 is about ensuring high quality design and place shaping. It says a high standard of design is required in all new developments. Development is expected to create a strong sense of place through drawing on the local context and being complementary to the locality. Applications for new development must be accompanied by appropriate information to demonstrate how the proposal will make a positive contribution to the character of Wiltshire, enhancing local distinctiveness, responding to the value of the natural and historic environment, reacting positively to its landscape setting and the existing pattern of development. And I would say that this does none of those things. It's just a massive intrusion into the street. And second reason for refusal would be a heritage one. The proposal involves the loss of an important heritage asset, thus conflicting with CP 58 of the Wiltshire Core Strategy and paragraph 203 of the NPPF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trevor. Before I ask for a seconder for that, would you mind if I were to run it past Kenny Green as to whether he feels that those reasons for refusal are defensible? Is that all right? Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Kenny, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Carbon. Yeah, those 2 grounds are certainly policy relating, and CP 57 and the heritage angle through the loss of the old vicarage were identified by David Cox in his report in terms of what the 2 critical issues may well be in terms of design, its impact on the street, its impact on the neighbours, and the resulting loss of the old Victorian building. So, Chair, undoubtedly those would be defendable on appeal.
Thank you, Kenny. Is there a seconder for the motion for refusal? Councillor Clark. Are you going to speak on this, Councillor Clark? Okay. I mean, maybe I could, oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Seed would like to come in, and then I'll go next.
I don't agree, and I'm sort of would want to speak against the proposal. There are a number of areas. This is an expansion of an existing business on an existing site on the same footprint, albeit higher. I understand where Councillor Carby is coming from about the heritage asset, but actually that heritage asset itself was abandoned many years ago when it ceased to be an old rectory and became became the internal part of a care home. I think that there is a need for the type of accommodation that's being included in this. I think it's a hugely complex application, which officers done extremely well to get to this stage. And without going on, my only concern, and it is a serious concern, is I would like it to try and work in that those cones are redesigned to allow some clear view, where, if possible, maybe from the other angle, but I don't know whether that can be done. But in essence, I would wish to oppose this motion to refuse, and were it defeated, would propose the acceptance of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Seed. I'll come back to you then to move something different if the motion for refusal is lost. I'm just going to say a few words. I have to say that the reason for amenity, the first of, Trevor, your reasons, strikes me as touch and go, though perhaps if you had brought in the amenity of the residents of the future care home building, I might have been a little bit more persuaded. But having been on site and having seen the actual impact on the neighbours' houses, I was more impressed by the comments of the two neighbours about noise in the early morning than the question of overlooking and so on, which there is overlooking from the existing building. When it comes to the heritage asset, I am with you, because I'm uneasy. I mean, yes, we need this kind of provision. Yes, we need more investment in care homes, especially, sadly, dementia care homes. But I'm very uneasy that an important village building, an undesignated heritage asset, is effectively treated as a brownfield site. I think one of the applicants referred to it as a brownfield site. And it doesn't seem to me, I agree with the officer that this is unsuitable for use as a care home. It's simply, the building was not designed for a care home. There are all kinds of narrow openings in it. The possibility of fitting in a lift, I gather, is almost impossible. So I agree that the building is not suitable for a care home, but I don't agree that that means that it needs to be demolished and treated as a brownfield site. So I'm tempted to support you on the second reason, but I'm thinking about what I should do given the two. Let's hear from other members. Does anyone else wish to contribute before we go to the vote on the motion for refusal? Councillor Weiger.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely difficult application, and yes, well done to the officer for pursuing with it. I think it's very, very evenly balanced, and I do think it comes down to, as I said before, a trade-off between core policy 49 about the needs of patients with dementia and core policy 57 about 46. Okay, sorry, CP46 and CP 57 on design. And as you say, it has to be a subjective judgment on built form, height, mass and scale. And mass, I think, is the criterion that I would be most concerned about here. And I'm kicking myself for not asking a question earlier on, and I don't know whether you may be able to help at this stage, but clearly the existing care home only has 20 beds, but is a functioning business. I don't know whether it's making a loss. The care home before had 40 beds. And clearly was operating at that level. I noticed earlier on in the report something saying that it wouldn't be financially viable to, I think it was to retain the existing frontage of the vicarage or to do something because of the business. I wish we had a bit more detail on the business plan, because I know you said we should look at this in its own merits, but what I'm also noticing is that if you took away the first floor or the top floor, you reduced by 9 rather than 14 bedrooms. That presumably means that you lose what is effectively the lower ground rather than the number of beds on the top, which is 14. So if you went to 2 stories, you would lose 9 beds, which gives you a care home of 43 beds. And I'm just wishing this application had come forward in that form, because I think that would have been a better compromise between those 2 core policies than the one we see in front of us, which is why, I am somewhat tempted to go along with this this proposal, much as though I really recognise the need to get these beds in place. So I think it's a really, really difficult one. I'm still mulling it over, and I'd like to know if any other views on that particular balance.
Thank you, Councillor Weiger. Is there anyone else who would like to speak before we go to the vote on the motion? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. I must admit, I was humming and hawing whether to support Councillor Carbon on this, but we've already spoken what we've heard today. I obviously decided I would. I think one of the valid points that Councillor Carbon made was that we are a planning committee. We're not the Adult Services Committee. It's not to decide whether this building is needed or not, although obviously it is. It comes down to the fact I'm concerned about the bulk of it. It's just such a huge thing to put in there and expect the neighbours to put up with, and the destruction of what was the rectory. As Councillor Seed said, it ceased to be a rectory some years ago, but the fact is it's still there. And as I say, after thinking about it, I decided I'd second Councillor Carbon's motion, and we'll see how we go. But I think there's a lot that could have been done about this, but of course, as a committee, it's not up to us. We can't go back to the applicant and say, oh, well, if you change this, could you change that? We can either say yes or no to what's in front of us. And I'm afraid with what's in front of me at the moment, I will say no. Thanks, Chairman.
Are there any other speakers before? I think to go back to Councillor Carbon to sum up if he wishes to, but before I ask him, is there anyone else who is waiting to speak who hasn't spoken? I beg your pardon. David wants to say something. David.
Sorry, Councillor Carbon, for the second reason for refusal, did you just mention CP 58? Because you can actually use part 1 of CP 57 as well. It talks about responding to the value of the historic environment. So it's something our conservation officers like to include it.
Okay, is the seconder happy to add that on? Okay, so we got a slightly amended. Have you got all this, Kieran? Okay, so I'm going to go back to Trevor to see if he wishes to sum up.
I don't think there's anything else to add. I was wondering if your point about the unacceptable impact on the amenity of future residents could be included. Neighbouring property, perhaps I said impact on the amenity of neighbouring properties and future residents. How would that be?
Any problem?
I think we need to be more clear about what in particular we'd be concerned about for future, is it future residents or future occupants of the building?
Yeah.
Trevor.
Well, they're both, aren't they?
Yeah, so that would need a little bit more precision in terms of why we would be refusing it.
Yeah.
On those
I
grounds.
think it's probably a bit tricky, Chairman, to put in. So I think probably best to leave as I initially.
You're going to leave that out?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, it's been moved and seconded for refusal. Would all in favour of the motion please show? 6. Any against? 2, 3, 4. That is refused. I guess it's almost inevitable that it will go to appeal. It will be a very interesting one, and we look forward to hearing the outcome. Thank you very much to everybody for coming along and helping us with their contributions in the open forum. And that is the end of today's meeting. And see you all, members of the committee, see you all next time.